Moving on to our next session then, this is called Attitudes to Office Working. Does gender or generation affect your view? And it's being moderated by my colleague, James Davis, employment partner at Lewis Silkin, our UK least laborious firm. Now, James was the co-founding partner of Lewis Silkin's employment practice and has over 30 years' experience of advising clients on employment issues large and small. Of particular relevance to the session he's moderating today, James is the executive editor of Age Discrimination, which is the authority on age discrimination in the UK, and it's published by Bloomsbury. He's also got a keen interest in artificial intelligence and employment law. So James is joined by 3 guest speakers for his session, but I will let him introduce himself. James, hello.
Hello, Catherine. Thank you for the introduction.
No problem. Over to you.
Technology is working effectively.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon to some of you. It's great to see so many people connected and participating in this webinar. The title of our session, as Catherine mentioned, is Attitudes to Office Working, Does Gender or Generation Affect Your View? We are first going to look at 2 multinational businesses and the approach of their return to work and home working in Europe, before getting an Australian perspective from Sarah, and Sarah in particular is going to touch on the gender and generational implications of home working. You'll have an opportunity to ask each panelist questions at the end of their session, and then at the end hopefully we'll have enough time for some more questions. In the UK, over 1/3 of workers worked at home at least partly in 2020. Sarah tells me the numbers were very similar in Australia. And I think for many employers and employees, home working has not only been surprisingly effective, but that it has had numerous benefits. I caught the final part of the last session and I could see that much of this was discussed then. Reduced time and cost of commuting, flexibility to fix your own working hours so that you might be able to do the laundry in gaps between your work commitments. For some, no need to dress up formally each day. For organisations, and a different geographical approach to resourcing, possibly reduced office costs. But the downsides of home working have also become increasingly apparent over the last months. Collegiality and collaboration, socialisation of work have all been missed. Separating home and work life has become increasingly difficult. And the challenge of switching off is something I think that many have faced, and some jurisdictions are introducing laws to address. Working hours actually increased in the UK last year with home working, in contrast to a 50-year trend where average individuals' working hours have declined. We're going to have some great perspectives on these issues from our panellists today, and I'm very pleased to introduce them. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Wim Bossens. Wim is an Assistant General Counsel at Johnson & Johnson. He joined the company in 1997 and is based in Brussels, Belgium. In his current role, Wim is Head of Employment Law for EMEA and Asia. His responsibilities are cross-sector over Johnson & Johnson's pharmaceutical, medical device and consumer businesses. Wim is leading the employment law team and supports in strategic matters such as acquisitions, divestitures, outsourcings, restructurings, downsizings, executive terminations, and European Works Council consultations. Wim started his career at Johnson & Johnson as a transactional and commercial lawyer. He was actively engaged in numerous M&As and other business development transactions for Johnson & Johnson in EMEA. Wim also served as the board attorney on different EMEA boards of Johnson & Johnson companies. Prior to joining Johnson & Johnson, Wim worked as a corporate and M&A lawyer at Linklaters de Bant, one of the leading business law firms in Brussels. He's an alumnus of the University of Louvain in Belgium. We'll then hear from Belinda Whitehouse. Belinda is the employee relations lead for the UK business at Accenture and has benefited as part of a long-standing job share there. Very recently, Belinda has added the employee relations lead role for Ireland to her remit, which brings with it new learning about local employment law and practice. The team Belinda leads provides ER and policy advice across the business and manages all formal discipline and grievance matters. In addition, her team regularly leads key work streams within people change initiatives and coordinates all of the UK and Ireland internal information and consultation group activities. And finally, we'll hear from Sarah Clarke. Sarah is a partner in the Employment and Labour team at Cause Chambers Westgarth in Melbourne, Australia, and leads Cause efforts as the Australian member of Ius Laboris. Sarah practices in all areas of employment and labour law, with particular expertise in complex employment litigation, workplace and regulatory investigations, discrimination law and sexual harassment, and across various industries such as finance, technology, energy and higher education. Recently, her practice has focused on the return to the office plans and implementation of mandatory vaccinations in the workplace. She has spent time in-house at a large government business enterprise and at one of Australia's largest financial institutions, and worked and studied both in Europe and Asia during her career. Before I hand over to the panelists, we're going to run a poll. We want to see how the approach to home working varies across the delegates that we have online today. To participate in our poll or to send us a question, and you may already have been told this, please do so by accessing the link below the screen or scanning the QR code that you can see on your screen. The poll question is going to ask about your approach to the return to the office for your office-based staff, and whether you require them to return full-time, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or you allow your workers to work as much time as they wish from home, or you're going to require them to work from home part of the time, or even require them to work from home full-time. Hopefully that poll is going to work properly and that you're going to be able to access it. And after Wim and Belinda have spoken, we'll look at the poll results. So with that, I will pass you over to Wim, who will speak from Johnson & Johnson's perspective.
Thank you, James. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all via this virtual platform, which is kind of unusual, but very, very interesting. So we'll see where that brings us. Let me perhaps start with giving you a couple of quick facts about Johnson & Johnson, because I think they matter when we're discussing our strategy and our approach to flexible working arrangements. Needless to say, Johnson & Johnson is a very big company. We're present in most parts or even most countries in the world, and we employ roughly 130,000 employees. So that's just to give you an idea about the size. More importantly, we are a very diverse company. We're a company with a very different product portfolio. So we're a healthcare company. Everything is healthcare related. But our products range from pharmaceutical, which includes the vaccine, as I think everybody knows by now, medicines, simple to sophisticated. We have a medical device business, which is in essence everything that you will find in the operating room for the surgeons in the hospitals, but it is also hips and knees, so the replacement business, contact lenses. And then we have what we call a consumer business. A consumer is where you find the baby products, sanitary products, things like Nicorette, Listerine, that sort of products. And that matters. Why does it? First of all, how did we get there? Johnson & Johnson is a traditional company. It's an old company that actually grew both through organic growth and acquisitions. And the net result of that is that we're a bit, I would say, a mixed bag of everything that is healthcare related. I mean, not that we just randomly bought companies or randomly developed products, but we have a very targeted vision of what we do. and which is healthcare. And within that sphere, I would say, we grow, we acquire, we divest, and that's how we evolve. The net result of that is that we're very diverse, and that in a way we're a house with many, many rooms. And we are also very decentralized. We're probably less decentralized than we were 20 years ago when I joined the company, but today there is still that strong sense of empowerment to those different businesses or to the different regions to essentially run the business the way they see fit. And then somehow it gets consolidated at corporate, but there is still a strong sense of empowerment. And I think what we're particularly good at, of course, we're not perfect, and there's many things where we can improve, just like any other company. We're certainly not, well, we're not perfect, obviously, but what we're particularly good at is we learn to manage, to cope with those differences and to manage that diversity. I would say that the underlying way we do that is that we're a very science-based company. So scientists, what do? They look at the facts, they analyze, they listen, they compare, they try something, they fail, they correct, they try again, and that's how they move on. And that is a principle that you will find at every level of the corporation at Johnson & Johnson. There is a fairly high tolerance for mistakes, but not if you make the same mistake as a second time, because that is not scientific. Why am I saying all that? Because today we already have, and this is pre-pandemic, we already had a strong view about flexible working arrangements. And so at Johnson & Johnson, we have long championed policies that provide our employees flexibility. And we consider constantly when, where, and how we work. And so what we saw in the past is that maybe the flexible working arrangements that we had too many of those. And so we were typically what we call flexible working arrangements are the sliding hours, so that people don't necessarily start at 8 o'clock in the morning or from 9 to 5, but can work different hours, could work remotely. We have that in many countries already. Could work part-time, etc., etc. So we had it, but there was probably a lack of consistency. We had, because we're now going through the exercise, what do we do with the pandemic? We listed everything that we had, and we saw that we have over 60 different remote work policies at Johnson & Johnson, which is probably too much. So we want to drive consistency, not just because we want to eliminate all those policies, but also because of fairness, because that is a point I will come back to in a second. And I would also say that in the past, the flexible working arrangements that we had were upon manager approval and just that manager, which again brings a lot of inconsistency, because now you have a manager essentially saying, you know what, you have 3 kids, why don't you just work from home, etc., etc. And that would then create situations that lasted for a couple of years. And what do you do next? And then other people in the office see the same thing, etc., etc. So this is really an opportunity for us to look at that, again, science-based. We look at it, we analyze, what can we do about it, how can we be more consistent, and how can we be more fair. We have 3 types of employees. We have office-based, well, by and large, I would say. We have office-based employees, people like me. We go to the office, or we travel, and then we come back, we go to the office. We have on-site employees, people in R&D, people in our manufacturing sites, and we have field employees. Actually, the on-site employees, people in our factories, never stopped working, not even during the pandemic, because we know how to run a pharmaceutical plant. We're used to sterile environments. People were wearing their masks anyway. people would scrub or get sterile treatment before they enter the manufacturing site anyway. So now setting up some plexiglass divisions for us was not a big deal really. So well, of course it was not easy, certainly not for the people to go there and the concerns that they had. But managing that is something where we had kind of an edge and we knew how to do that, and we never stopped that. Mind you that the on-site employees, when we look at the 130,000 employees that we have globally, it's about half of the population, roughly. I don't know if precise. I don't have precise numbers, but it's roughly the half of the population. So essentially, that was covered again with the flexible working arrangement that we already had in place. Field employees, well, those are the folks that go to the hospitals, the medical reps, for instance, or the sales reps. They started working again in the field. So when we now look at return to the office, it is really about that. I wouldn't call them a negligible number, obviously, but it is a minority when we look at the 130,000 people, the office-based people. And there, what we will do tomorrow is we will build on the flexible working arrangements, which we will make more consistent, as I just explained. And we will evolve that, and we will try to drive more consistency and compliance, but we will add to that what we call J&J Flex. And J&J Flex is a system where people will be allowed to work from home for 2 days a week. So and our guiding principle really is that there is no replacement for human interaction. And depending on the type of company that you are, we're not an IT company where you can do a lot from your computer at home. We are a science-based company, and we strongly believe that to drive creativity, to drive innovation, and all those things, that people need to be able to interact. And so our preference, if you will, is that people go to the office and don't just decide in the morning, well, you know, I've been working from home for the last 18 months, I think I'm going to work from home today. That is a situation that I don't think we fancy very much. And so we're looking at that again from a very science-based approach. We'll look at what happened during the pandemic. What did we do? What do we learn from that? Clearly, remote working and working virtual has many, many advantages, which I will, of course, not list here. We all know them. Travel is clearly something that will be significantly reduced. I had to travel all the time, so to speak. I think that my travel will probably fall back to maybe 30–40% of what I used to do before. And that's a good thing. I think we all recognize that we traveled too much and that we discovered that there's many things that we now can achieve just by connecting via Zoom or via Teams. And so what it means in J&J Flex is essentially that we looked at that. We developed an enterprise-wide approach for those on-site employees to say, look, if you want to work from home 2 days, you can, but it will be voluntary. And because we are empowering and because we are decentralized, it will be up to the countries to decide, do we opt into that system or do we opt out? And the J&J Flex is not a replacement of any existing flexible working arrangement that those countries already may have. So if those countries now opt in, they then will have to manage that with their employees. So managers will have to look at their teams. It will be team coordinated. How do we do that? Will we decide, for instance, I'm in Belgium, will we decide that we all take Friday? Excuse me? No. Will we decide that we will have one common flex day or not? That is really up to the countries. And so the maximum will be up to 2 days remote. But again, upon manager approval, and I think we're also putting in place a very robust approval plan. So not just manager approval, but also HR. Why? Because we do not want to end up in situations where a manager approves J&J Flex or flexible working arrangement, and then, you know, rotates to another job, and then the next manager comes in, is basically taking over something that already existed and then doesn't know what to do. And before long, you have 5 years of people working from home that you didn't know about. So we really want to put in place a robust system. It will not be perfect. I'm pretty sure that we will learn as things evolve, but looking at it, that is the way that we decided. So in short, I think, James, we decided not to go the full way of remote working. We recognize the benefits of it, but we do want people in the office, and it will always be voluntary. So the last thing I will say about it is that, by the way, that will be when we are all returning to the office, because today in EMEA, we do not have any country yet where people are fully back in the office. I mean, all of us. So we're still in those different waves, I think, as all companies do. I think it will not be long before some of those countries will allow everybody back into the office. And as from there, we will start with a system of 2 days at home, 3 days in the office, but again, voluntary, and it will be your choice. So I don't know if that is enough, but I will stop here and give it back to you, James.
Thank you very much, Wim. That was fascinating. And we have an interesting question that's come in already, but I'm going to come back to that, if I may, after the other speakers. And I'm going to move on now to Belinda, who's going to give us the story from Accenture.
Thank you, James, and hello, everyone. I should probably start by saying that for those of you who are not familiar with Accenture, we are a global professional services company with over 500,000 employees worldwide, with almost 11,000 of those in the UK. We offer strategy, consulting, interactive technology and operation services to our 6,000 clients in about 120 countries. And our stated purpose is to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity. And what goes with that is an aspiration to embrace the power of change to create 360-degree value for our clients, our communities, and of course our people. My focus today is on the UK, where the work I do with my team is based, and I'm personally based up in Cheshire in the northwest. The rest of my team are based in London. And what I'd like to do is just start, if I may, by looking backwards briefly to life for our people at Accenture before the pandemic. As Wim did a moment ago, it's quite important to just, I think, contextualise where we're headed by looking back at where we've come from. And in our UK business, for the purposes of this discussion, I think it's helpful also to broadly split the roles our people do into two categories. Those who are client-facing, which is the majority of our people, and then those who are in roles at Accenture that are not directly client-facing. And looking backwards, traditionally, our client-facing people have spent a significant proportion of their time working on our client sites, working on our clients' premises, collaborating with client teams. And this is often, albeit not always, Monday to Thursday, and then working from home or in a local office on a Friday. Conversely, those who are not client-facing have typically flexed where they work, depending on their deliverables for that day, the week or the month, but doing that through their own choice and working on a trust basis that they will be productive where they are, they'll be efficient with their time, and they will decide where it's appropriate for them to do that work. A high proportion of that latter group choose working patterns that involve a combination, working from home and time when they are office-based, but the focus is typically to work from home. At Accenture, everyone has an element of their role that includes working with colleagues from across the UK and across our worldwide organisation. So a combination of those two things. So pre-pandemic, as now, Microsoft Teams meetings and the use of a wide range of collaboration tools is an everyday experience for our people at Accenture. We've also been hot desking in our offices for many years, less popular with some people than others. And importantly, it's a different kind of population to the population that Wim talked about. We were all enabled technologically to work from home, and the vast majority of the work that we do, and this is where the difference from Johnson & Johnson arises, is the vast majority of the work that we do can be done from a remote location. We have very few people in the UK that are required to be in a particular place to do their job of work. And therefore, it's possible to do the work, broadly speaking, wherever there is a Wi-Fi connection, with, of course, appropriate confidentiality. And that, of course, is very key in any of the work that our people are doing. There have been some exceptions historically. For example, working from another country is not actively supported, and there's a whole range of reasons for that. And I think there's a later session that covers that territory in more detail, so I won't go into that here. But it's fair to say, in summary, that the ability to do almost all roles in our UK business from a remote location is obviously different to that which Wim has described. When the UK moved into lockdown, it was therefore, given that context I've just walked you through, more of the same for many of our people. So they spent more time doing something they had previously already done and were previously reasonably comfortable with. Those technologies they were using to work from home were familiar to them, and they were also robust. They knew how to make them work. They knew how to get help if it wasn't possible to make them work. And naturally, as other speakers have spoken about in this session and the previous session, there were, of course, individual challenges for people, and we were particularly keen to understand from people who were struggling with mental health challenges throughout the pandemic, amongst others. That's one I just pick out as very important to us. And of course, they were addressed with consideration about the particular set of circumstances and, of course, compassion for those particular set of circumstances. From a practical perspective, we're currently social distancing in our offices. Wim touched on that a moment ago. So in the UK, we have a trust-based, testing requirement, and mask wearing is still mandatory in our offices. Due to the reduced capacity due to social distancing, we have therefore currently got to limit the people that we allow back into our office space for the moment. And therefore, as of now, right now, most of our people continue to work from home as a matter of routine. But moving on, therefore, to think about the future, as many of you will be doing, we, of course, continue to focus on the safety of our people, our partners and our clients, and that rigour will necessarily remain for as long as the long arms of the pandemic remain with us. But as the UK has opened up considerably from lockdown, our people naturally in the UK are turning their minds to a return to the office, as are our clients. At Accenture, we are now using the future of work type language rather than return to office language where we can and where it's appropriate, to try and focus everyone on the future rather than looking back to what was. And this, of course, is about using the opportunity that the enforced working from home brought to everybody to think about different ways of doing our work going forwards. We want to seize this opportunity, of course, as I'm sure you all do, and alongside that, and as part of that, seek out new options that we may not have imagined were possible before. So thinking about this as a new normal, what does this new normal bring with it that we might not have been able to foresee pre-lockdown? We are working on the basis that how we utilise office space going forwards will, at a high level, and of course there will be differences underneath this high level, but certainly at a high level, it will be about teams rather than individuals, and collaboration with colleagues and collaboration with clients will be at the centre of that. Throughout this period of significant change, we've been able to gain very rich insights from our people, and we've done that through surveys and pulse checks. And I note that Lotte on an earlier session talked about this at TomTom, where it's important that we understand what people's views are and what they want going forwards. What we know already, and we'll continue those conversations, is that people want flexibility. But also we recognise, as our people recognise, that one size does not fit all, and that we want to personalise those solutions for individuals going forwards as far as we are able to. Importantly, we want to continue being intentionally inclusive and ensure that all roles have an in-person connection opportunity, so that there isn't a role at Accenture where someone will be permanently working from home and will not actually connect with people face to face at any point during any given year. Naturally, we want to continue the conversations with our clients about their plans for the future of work, and those requirements from each of our clients, which again will vary, will be a key part of our response. Of course they will. In practice, what we expect will happen is that we will empower people at a team level to shape the most appropriate mix of flexible working for that particular team and their clients. As we move forwards on this journey, of course, we will measure and evaluate success, and it is inevitable that our thinking will evolve as we do that. And I think it's fair to say in closing that that means there are very interesting times ahead for us all. With that, may I hand you back to James?
Thank you very much, Belinda. I wonder whether we can now move to the poll results and whether we can put those on screen. So I think this is reflecting Johnson & Johnson's approach in showing that the majority of the, not the majority, but the most popular answer to the question was allowing people to work 2 days a week from home. Second, 3 days a week at home. And I think, I don't know whether you agree with me, but I think that's not that surprising that those are the two most common results. 16% say as much time as they wish, full-time return to the office 13%, requiring work for part of the week 9%, 1 day a week 7%, full-time homework 4%, 4 days a week from home. I can't see that as a thing on the screen. Is that 0%? No. I hope you think that's interesting, and probably I think you'll share my view that it probably reflects roughly what you would have expected to see from the poll. But thank you very much to everybody that responded to that poll. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Sarah for her contribution. Thank you.
Thanks very much, James, and to you, Laboris, as well for the invitation to participate in today's discussion. And hello, everyone joining in. As James mentioned, I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia, which is soon to become the most locked down city in the world, I understand. So we've spent close to a total of 9 months in hard lockdown since early last year. And it's safe to say at this point, personally, I'm very eager for a change of scenery, and I'm looking forward to returning to the office, hopefully in a couple of months' time. Perhaps I can give you a quick snapshot of what's actually happening in Australia at the moment, and our path back to some form of office working. We are, as I said, still in hard lockdown in a couple of states in Australia. There are some who are enjoying some freedoms, but best not to talk about that too much because I might get upset. But look, throughout the pandemic and largely due to the lockdown approach, comparatively speaking, the case and death numbers from COVID-19 have been relatively low across Australia. The flip side of that, however, has been that our vaccination program was actually very slow to commence, and we had major vaccine supply issues for various reasons. And at this point in time, we remain a really long way behind many countries of the world with our vaccination rates. I think the numbers today are around 41.6% of people over 16 years being fully vaccinated. In saying that, we are gaining momentum, which is positive. Our current vaccine speed is amongst the fastest in the world, and Victoria and New South Wales, being the two states still in hard lockdown, expect to emerge from these measures as a result of the increase in vaccinations at various points throughout October and November. With a view to us all being open, I suppose, at Christmas and for the summer break. Before the third wave hit us in June this year, we had actually a taste of being able to return to the office in early 2021. In Australia, very similar to the UK and what James mentioned, around 40% of our workforce was shifted pretty much overnight into remote working when that pandemic hit early last year. But still a majority were able to work in various essential services as well as in construction and some other industries. Prior to the pandemic, only around 8% of employees in Australia had a form of work from home arrangement. So quite the contrast to what Belinda was saying about her workforce. For many in Australia, this was a very unusual move and quite drastic in terms of how quickly it happened. Interestingly, when the stay-at-home orders eased earlier this year and we had that green light to start returning to the office, the number of people working from home for a portion of the week remained at just below 40%. So very little actually changed as a result of that easing of restrictions. Now, no doubt, I think there was some hesitancy about returning to the office in circumstances where our vaccine rates were low. But I think this absolutely demonstrates that remote working has been a positive experience for many, and the flexibility it has brought has been highly valued. And as such, I think we can expect, and this is absolutely consistent with what I'm hearing in this discussion and the discussion before, that it's here to stay in some form. I think this is further supported through research that we've recently had the benefit of. The Australian Productivity Commission recently released a report called Working from Home, and it shows that many employees are willing to change jobs or even accept lower wages to have this ability to continue working from home in some capacity. What's also clear from the research is that an overwhelming number of employees want a hybrid model of working, and that is consistent with those poll results. A much smaller portion are preferring an entirely remote workplace or an office-only model. So as we open up in Australia, hopefully towards the end of the year, consistent with the observations already, I think we will likely see most employers in Australia who have this workforce transitioning back in, we'll be trialling a hybrid model of working. And to date, when we were allowed back in the office, employers were a little hesitant about how they go about doing this. You know, can they issue directions to return to the office for a certain number of days per week? Should it be a form of encouragement? No doubt these matters will be explored in more detail over the coming months and possibly years. And I expect we will probably see some legal challenges from employers whose strong preference is to remain perhaps working in a remote setting. Surveys have also revealed an expectation gap between employers and employees in relation to hybrid working, and I think there are many more employees believing they can carry out their work based on a hybrid model long term. I think these differences will require very careful management and communication by employers at both the individual and team level over time, and potentially really any misstep around these issues could be quite costly in terms of talent, retention, attraction, and also reputation of organisations in the market. As to a remote model, I'm sure most of you know there's a small number of organisations who are adopting an entirely remote model. This is largely occurring in those high-tech organisations, and I believe there's a session later on about the digital nomads. And this is really about the importance of a global talent pool and collaborative technologies, which are commonplace. But research certainly at the Australian end shows that very few workers want to work at home all the time. Key reasons being that there might be a reduction in opportunities to collaborate and network, reduce face-to-face time with managers, and perceived or actual consequences for long-term career prospects. So I think diving a bit deeper into some of these issues from a gender and generation point of view and how they might actually influence working models to be adopted. There's certainly been a number of studies at this end which focus on certain segments of the workforce. And from a generational perspective, consistently the studies in Australia are showing that the majority of younger employees, so the bracket of 18 to 30-year-olds, are feeling very enthusiastic about returning to an office, as compared to those, interestingly, in the 51 to 60-year-old bracket, who are not so keen and are much happier to remain in a hybrid working model. Younger generations, I think, place higher value on social interactions with colleagues, and in certain surveys there's been indications that they find real meaning and connection in the workplace. I think it's fair to say many are also living in share houses or potentially with their parents still, and so there's no doubt an incentive to get back to the office. From my own observations, in our law firm, we have graduate lawyers who've expressed a keen interest in returning to the office, not just for the free food, but importantly to access greater mentoring and learning opportunities, which is really critical to their development as young lawyers. Learning by osmosis certainly doesn't occur in a remote setting like it does in the office. I have to say, though, in saying that, I think we owe it to our younger generation, who are clearly very adept at using technology and have adjusted, in my view, extremely well to this new environment, that there are real opportunities perhaps for them to learn and develop in different ways, in contrast to how that might have occurred before. And I think where there is a desire to work in a hybrid setting, managers and leaders will need to think creatively about how they will harness their development in this environment, encouraging perhaps them to be more solutions focused, taking initiative, being more creative, as opposed to simply waiting to learn by listening and watching others. So a combination, I think, will be required. Another factor that has been expressed by young people is that working remotely has increased feelings of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and a worsening of that work-life balance. I have to say, starting your working life in an environment where the norm perhaps is to work late into the evening and to have little delineation between work and home is really less than ideal. And mental health and wellbeing, I think, will be an ongoing challenge, even in a hybrid working environment. I am absolutely hopeful that a partial return to the office can restore some of that pre-pandemic boundaries between work and life. Australian research does, however, conflict on whether older employees, so I'm going to call the older employees those who are over 60 years old, would prefer to work from the office or home. One study found that older employees were significantly more likely to desire a return to the office than younger colleagues. However, a BCG report actually found employers aged 60 years and over had the strongest preference for a working from home, pretty much solely model. And this could be due to perhaps those older persons have had an established career, they place less importance on social interactions and spending time with colleagues in person. But I think if we move back to just quickly the younger generation, if a hybrid model is to be adopted moving forward, and I think that seems to be the position of most organisations, we will need to think carefully about ways to ensure that they feel connected, supported and mentored, and that there is an appropriate investment in their development. I think actually this has been one of the least discussed effects of distributed work, and it really will need some effort and planning from employers to get it right. Moving to a gender perspective, and I think perhaps unsurprisingly, some of the surveys at the Australian end have found that women are more likely than men to want to continue working from home. This is also consistent with another study from the Grattan Institute that found that men were overall more enthusiastic about returning to the office. I think the key factors for women are really around flexibility and the requirement to manage work commitments, caring responsibilities and unpaid labour. A hybrid working model, I think, will certainly assist facilitating juggling all of those responsibilities. For some women, the ability to work from home, I think, has increased their flexibility to take on more work opportunities, which is really positive. However, others have reported that increase in that real increased struggle in attending to care responsibilities in the same time and space as their workplace. And no doubt that has been exacerbated by what everybody loves around homeschooling for long stretches. So there are real concerns, I think, at this point that a male preference for a return to the office coupled with female preferences to work from home could negatively impact gender equity. A rise in male-dominated offices no doubt could result in men gaining more opportunities for face-to-face networking, for social interactions, better work, better results, more promotions and pay rises. I have to say, whilst that outcome is absolutely a possibility, I remain optimistic that the increased prevalence of both genders working from home over the last 18 months has been incredibly positive, and there is a real opportunity here to promote gender equity in the workplace. In returning to the office, I think flexible working arrangements hopefully are less likely to be viewed through a gender lens. Certainly prior to COVID, many employers and employees in Australia associated flexible work as something that women did, which really did affect the likelihood of men requesting such arrangements. And it certainly came with, I think, some stigma for men if they wanted to work like that. So it'll be absolutely key, I think, at this point to ensure that organisations don't revert to old ways, with mostly women working flexibly, whether that be from home or part-time or with adjusted hours, and that there is a continued encouragement for flexible working arrangements equally for men and women. I think also to pick up on a comment from one of the earlier sessions, it's about the value of also performance over presenteeism. And the location of work must be eliminated from performance evaluations and pay considerations. James.
James,
I think you might be on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Sarah. Apologies. You raise a whole host of important issues that I'm sure we're all going to be grappling with in the months and years ahead. We've had several questions that have come through, and I'm going to pick up on one initially. Its question relates to those who are unable to work from home and the concerns about the equitable treatment and the policies that arise when you have part of your workforce who can work from home and part of them which can't. And I'm going to ask Vim in a second particularly to answer that, because I suspect that with Johnson & Johnson, you have quite a few people involved in manufacturing for whom this discussion isn't of no relevance, because they have to be in at their workplace to work. And I was talking to an organisation quite recently. In the UK until recently, if you went on a holiday to most countries outside the UK, there was an obligation to quarantine at home for a period of time. And for those people that were able to work from home, of course, they could go on holiday to France or Spain or Italy or wherever they wanted to go on holiday to, and return to the UK and start work immediately and work from home. But that wasn't available to those who were unable to work from home. And in the organisation I was talking to, there was with a significant number of people who couldn't work from home, there was a groundswell of discontent that they were effectively being treated less favourably than others, and that they had to take unpaid leave before they could return to work. And that organisation decided to prohibit home working where people were returning from holiday, even though it was physically possible, so as not to disadvantage those that were unable to benefit from that. And I'd be interested if Vim had any comments on that, and also whether Sarah or Belinda did.
Yeah, thank you, James. I think that's exactly the point I was trying to make about the diversity, because when we're discussing return to the office, for Johnson & Johnson at least, we're looking at a minority of the employees. And the point I was trying to make is that we had flexible working arrangement for quite some time. What we need to do now is to try and be more consistent about it. Exactly to the point that you were making, about fairness, because you do not want to deprive people who need to be at the factory. If you're a factory worker, you cannot work from home. That's just the nature of your job. For those people, we've had arrangements like a flex schedule, that people can slide with their hours. We have had arrangements like compressed work week, and different kind of arrangements. Again, I told you that we had over 60 of those policies globally. So what we're now doing, so we've had them all the time, and there is nothing new about it. What we want to do now is really try to streamline it a little bit better, make it more consistent, to drive also more fairness, but we're not forgetting about those people. And we certainly don't forget that when we're talking about return to the office, that actually the majority of our people are already back at work. So it's a very good comment. Again, it will never be perfect, but at least and the last thing I will say about it, James, is that the situation that we do not want is that people decide for themselves. We really want a good interaction and dialogue about how are we going to do this. We do not want a situation where people in the morning wake up and say, this worked for the last 18 months, I'm staying home. That I don't think is a good idea, because people only look at their job and their work, but you also have a business to run. And like me, I have my team. I want to develop people, I want to grow people, and I cannot do that when I don't see them. And then, of course, you will have businesses where it is easier, like the consultancy business. I can perfectly see that is easier to make that happen from home, but we're not that type of business, and so we need to find other alternatives.
Thank you. Belinda, Sarah, have you got anything you want to add to that?
Just one observation I would make. You're absolutely right. The difference between us is clear, and we've had very limited difficulty with people who, and they are in a small number, who have been required to work in an office location. So I can't really speak to that. But what I would say is that one of the challenges we faced with people working from home is the desire for people, whatever is going on in their personal life, to be online and working. So we have had people who have tested positive for COVID, but because they're at home, they want to continue working. So we've had a sort of an unexpected consequence of the familiarity of working from home and the ability to do one's job from home in helping people understand, as we touched on earlier, that is not required. If you are unwell, you are unwell. Just because you can sit at your laptop and you could respond to emails, it doesn't mean that you have to. And another point on the hybrid piece that we've talked a lot about, one of the things that we are very conscious of moving forwards is to think carefully about where we've got mixtures in teams of people working from home and people in the office. Because whilst everybody was in lockdown, and I've experienced this myself because I work from home all the time, prior to lockdown, if I was doing a meeting with my team and they were all in London in an office and I was dialing in via Teams or Zoom or whatever it might be, that meeting experience, that collaboration experience was very different for me than it was for everybody else. During lockdown, we all experienced exactly the same thing. And going forwards, we need to think about people's contribution, people's confidence to contribute when it's a hybrid setup, because actually it affects people in a way that we hadn't anticipated.
Thank you. I think we have, I'm not sure if Sarah had anything pressing to add, but I've probably got time for one more question if we can fit it in. We've got 4 or 5 minutes left. So we've had several questions, but another one relates to the experiences and consultation that organisations are undertaking as part of the return to the office, because no doubt country to country varies, people's individual circumstances vary, people's attitudes to risk and the health and safety issues, which haven't gone away completely, vary. And what is the approach to consultation, and what are organisations doing if they have employees who are reluctant for health and safety reasons to return yet to the office?
Yeah, James, I'm happy to jump in here from the Australian perspective. I mean, in consultation, there are certainly some legal obligations around that in Australia, depending on what kind of workforce you have. And if you have industrial instruments in place that have formal consultation requirements. So any kind of major change, so it might be the implementation of a policy around returning to work, flexible work, and indeed we're now looking at mandatory vaccination policies. So there's certainly some legal boxes to tick there. I think on flexible work and looking at hybrid models, moving away from a legal perspective, there's certainly been a desire to do surveys, seek feedback, and really looking at what the individual needs are of certain people. And I think, as Belinda said, there's no one-size-fits-all approach here, and there will be different needs and circumstances for particular cohorts. I think an interesting concept that I've come across in reading about this issue is this idea of developing employee personas, which represent different segments of an organisation's workforce. So looking at young professionals to parents to executive levels. There's a real, I think, encouragement to get to know your workforce at a micro level, and then looking at value propositions to really meet their needs and aspirations. And no doubt that will feed into the attracting talent, retaining talent, and ensuring high levels of engagement, productivity, and that real sense of achievement. But I think consultation is an ongoing thing. I think this needs to be constantly reviewed and monitored, and a constant conversation. Also picking up on what Belinda said about getting that composition back in the office right. Certainly one of my personal experiences earlier in the year was I went back into the office and all of the young people there, but there was nobody else. There was no one else there. And so they've obviously come back into the office for a particular reason. And if there are no managers there, if there's no middle level people there, that's not the experience that they're after. So I think it really is getting that balance right. And that will come from speaking to people about their needs and wants, but also what is right for the team and the organisation more broadly. So absolutely an ongoing conversation.
We have about a minute left if either Vim or Belinda want to say anything about the consultation processes, about the return to work exercise.
But for us, it's a process that we have to follow, James, and we respect that. I do not have look, I'm not our employee relations specialist, but I do not have the impression that consultation would be detrimental to achieving what we want to achieve. On the contrary, I think we do not have that relationship with our Works Council that they will say, look, we all want to work 5 days from home. That's not the type of relationship that we have. And the only way for us to get there is respect that process and to encourage people to come back. We cannot terminate people for not coming to the office, so we have to encourage, and we're pretty confident. It will take time. It will take time, but we will get there.
Fantastic.
And I would echo that completely, that, consultation is what we're obliged to do, but also what we want to do, because the views of our consultation forum have been very valuable in helping us shape how we message, really. That'd be one of the things I would want to emphasize, how we get our messaging right, because we're trying to talk to a wide group of people with lots of different views that are personal to them and their circumstances, and utilising their experience on that and the anecdotal information they bring to the discussion has been really valuable.
Brilliant. I'm afraid that time has run out. I'm sure we could go on talking about this for a long time yet, and there's unfortunately a number of questions we haven't been able to address. I don't know if there's a facility for us to be able to do that offline, but I'd just like to thank our participants. I felt that was fascinating, and thank you very much, and best wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you, James, Sarah, Belinda and Vim. It was great to have that range of views and experience on work from home versus working remotely, and how this largely depends on the nature of the business and how practical it is to work from home. What was clear, though, what was coming through, is that employees everywhere are seeming to want some level of flexibility and a hybrid way of working, which was also reflected in the audience poll results. It was probably no surprise to anybody that the studies have shown that younger employees seem to miss working in the office for that human interaction aspect and for the learning and training opportunities, and that older employees seem more content to work from home. Also, from a gender perspective, the fact that women find the flexibility of working from home more attractive than men is perhaps also unsurprising.